Welcome back to Lunchtime BABLing. My name is Shea Brown. I'm the CEO of BABL AI, a company that audits algorithms for bias, good governance, and ethical risk. I'm back again with Jeffery Recker. He's our COO and is going to help me, discuss the news of the week. And I guess there's so much going on. One thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about is the IAAA, and that's not the IEEE, but the IAAA. Anyway, Jeffrey, why don't you tell us about yourself
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. So for people that don't know, I'm Jeffrey Recker, uh, co-founder, chief operating officer of BABL AI. Been kind of behind the scenes since day one. Getting a little bit out of my comfort zone, coming on to lunchtime babbling with you, kind of talk about key issues in AI governance, AI risk, and all the stuff Babel is about. Uh, and yeah, today I guess big news for us and just the AI space in general is this International Association of Algorithmic Auditors, which was just announced recently, and you're one of the key founding members. Just I guess let us know what this is. Like, what is the IAAA or what do we call it? What is it? Why should we know about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think IEEE is the short form, but International Association for Algorithmic Auditors of algorithm. I don't even know if it's of or for. But in any case, it's a professional association for AI and algorithm auditors. I think that was it's one of the things that I think we've needed for a while, and there's been associations there. I mean, there are organizations that are working on this all over the world. As we know, I mean, we interact with a lot of them. For Humanity is one that works really specifically on auditing standards, and their role is really focused on taking laws and translating them into auditable criteria. So taking a particular law and saying, all right, what does that mean? What is that obligation? And then how could an auditor audit for those obligations to ensure that somebody's done that? And that's really important and valuable thing. We need that. However, I think what was missing is a place where professional algorithm auditors and AI auditors could really get together and advocate for the field, the professional field, a real professional association. And so a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, Edicus, which is a firm that's very similar to Babel, uh, hosted this meeting, and so we started um, in Barcelona, and it brought together a bunch of different organizations, not just professional auditors, but also people from academia and civil society, folks from like Ada Lovelace Institute, Mozilla Foundation, Data and Society, and academics and professional auditors like Babel AI, Edicus, and even some platforms that do sort of AI governance, like Truera had representatives there, for instance. And the idea was to discuss the field, like what's the state of the field currently. And we went had a meeting in Barcelona, and then flew up to Brussels to talk to the European Parliament about auditing, and in particular AI auditing, and how that could affect the EU AI Act and the Digital Services Act. So fast forward kind of a year later, I think we all felt, those of us who were at the meeting felt that there needed to be some ongoing efforts. It can't just be sort of a one-off thing. And so we all decided that we wanted to form a professional association, which really is the focus on the professionalism of the field, not so much on the details of criteria or methodology, even though we will discuss those sorts of things. But in my mind, at least, the real focus is what does it mean to be a professional AI and algorithm auditor? And how do we sort of codify that? How do we come up with a process to deliberate on that and just support this growing industry? And so that's where it was born. And so we launched, I think, 2 weeks ago, and we had like a sort of an official launch meeting last week, where 3 of the founding members, so Gemma from Etiquus, myself, and Kathy O'Neill from Orca, spoke to All Tech is Human, which is another great organization that sort of advocates for responsible AI. And and so now we're in the process of figuring out what's the next step and how do we grow this organization into an organization that will support auditors.
That's I mean, it's amazing news. I think it's critically important. One question I have for you is, let's kind of take a step back for a moment, and kind of high level to somebody who doesn't know what an algorithmic audit is, kind of explain what an algorithmic audit is and why something like this is important for the algorithmic auditing industry. Just kind of give us a high level, what is it and why is it important?
Okay, so at a high level, an AI or algorithm audit, the focus is on somehow checking an algorithmic system to ensure that it doesn't hurt people. So that's probably like the highest level, like just what is this all about? Making sure that algorithmic systems are not going to hurt people. And you can hurt people in many different ways. It could be, and also many different kinds of people, and it can include people in the organizations themselves. So that's sort of the high level thing. But in practice, there are different ways of doing that. So one would be that literally a company might hire an auditing firm like ours, let's say, to come in and directly do an assessment of that system. So that might include sort of a detailed risk assessment, which we've talked about before in a lot of detail, in really mapping out where the risks of harm in this system, what are the components that lead to that risk, and then sort of testing and evaluating how likely is it to happen. So that's what I would call a direct engagement. There are other ways of doing it, which is more akin to sort of financial auditing, where let's say there's a standard for the things that a company needs to do and things that have to be set up within the algorithmic system. I think things like testing and metrics that need to be monitored and certain thresholds that need to be in place. And auditing could also be going in and verifying that a company has set up all those things that are needed. So in the case of the EU AI Act, it's going to be fairly straightforward. Actually, not straightforward at all. It's very complicated, but the idea is fairly straightforward. People have to comply with all of these requirements of the EU AI Act, and an auditor could come in and go through that checklist and really make sure that they did everything that they're supposed to do. Now that's much more akin to financial auditing. Like you have to have your books in order, the numbers have to be accurate, right? And so there is still checking of numbers. And so it's not like financial auditor could do algorithmic auditing. There is a different skill set that's required there. But that's essentially the idea, is that you're checking the homework of the company. And that's, we do these for New York City, and we would call that sort of an attestation engagement, where the company is attesting to the fact that they're compliant, and an independent auditor comes in and verifies that. But then a lot of people also talk about auditing as being really technical. So that's the term gets thrown around a lot. And the third sense of what people think of is more like literally just going and testing the algorithmic system. So now with LLMs like ChatGPT and others, people think about auditing as like going in and having some technical tests of making sure the system is behaving the way it's supposed to behave. Now, that plays a role in the other two types of audits as well, but in a real way, people also think of that as an audit. And so all of these things are important for mitigating risk. And that's what we mean by algorithmic auditors. It's that whole spectrum. And so the people that are in this, would be in this association, are people who are engaged in all of these various aspects of protecting people. And it doesn't have to always be one particular type.
Yeah, that's a good overview. One follow up I'd have for that is then maybe kind of dive in a little more on the importance of an organization like this when it comes to algorithmic auditing. Like, we have these three different types of algorithmic audits. We have all these different, ways of thinking about it. What value would an organization like this bring to that ecosystem?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's the professional conduct is the main thing. So if someone says they have had their system audited in some way, in any of those, let's say, three aspects that I just mentioned, in any of those, the question, they've had it audited for a reason. Either it's for compliance or it's some external assurance, like other stakeholders have some assurance that certain things have been done, or they're looking for problems of the algorithm if it's a real technical testing. But one thing that's critical is that somebody understands what they mean when they say that, and understands what kind of professional is doing that auditing. And so an association like this is going to be helpful for defining some aspects of what being a professional auditor means, both in terms of what your capabilities are, like you have to have certain capabilities to do this, knowledge, skills, experience, and also what kind of code of conduct you operate under. And that's going to be critical for building the trust in these sorts of engagements. So, other organizations like For Humanity, for instance, does some, works on some aspects of those, because For Humanity works on the sort of the content, the criteria of what an audit is. And because there's been no other players really in that space, they've had to also fill in the gaps for some of the code of conduct and the ideas of independence. And I think the idea of this organization is that we can take some of that on and let the auditors themselves help define what the profession should be in terms of professional conduct, and then other organizations can work on ensuring that the content is adequate and useful for people. So that's a basic idea. If I tell you my system's been audited by so and so, you know what it means for so and so to be an algorithm auditor, and you can have some trust or added trust that the process was not just a rubber stamping exercise.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's a fear in the ecosystem too, is that, an algorithmic audit is just a rubber stamp, right? So having something like this and having this transparency around this stuff and letting people know what, in fact, you are looking for and testing against is just super critical. So you mentioned a couple of the original thought leaders with the IAAA. Maybe you just want to go in a little deeper and just kind of discuss, who you all are, where your criteria, why you guys, why are you starting this, making the initiative? Just kind of, and maybe if you're not speaking on behalf of everyone else, just yourself, but I'm curious if you want to dive into that a bit.
Well, I mean, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that there aren't too many people who do this professionally. Now, I have to be careful there, because there are plenty of people in sort of traditional audit and assurance firms, like think the Big Four and others, that do regulatory assurance that is related to algorithms. And the same thing goes for privacy professionals or IT testers, people who will audit IT systems. All of them have some in some ways, audit AI in different contexts. But there aren't too many people who are very niche focused on auditing AI systems with the purpose of either regulatory compliance, where there is some overlap, but that outwardly looking focus of ensuring that these systems don't mess up and hurt people. And that there's been a real call for that. And there aren't that many people who are really focused on that. There are people moving into the industry. And so the reason that we are doing it, BABL, but also Etiquus and the people who were there, is because we focused on that. That was our primary objective. It wasn't like we were trying to do something else. We had one mission, and that was to make sure these algorithms don't harm people. And so it made sense. This was a new field. I think even though it's related to other fields, it is new and it has new capabilities that are needed by the auditors. And so the other people that came along were people who weren't necessarily auditing per se, but they were weighing in on the ecosystem and what it means to audit algorithms and the need. So Ada Lovelace Institute, for instance, has published a lot of work around AI auditing. And the difference between regulatory assurance and like bias testing and impact assessments and that kind of thing. And so that's why they're a natural fit to come be part of this discussion. Same with Data and Society and the Mozilla Foundation. Like they're all, even though they weren't per se doing audits themselves, they had really important insights and had done a lot of research. And so we had this practical end of like people who were literally out there doing some of the first algorithmic audits that were ever done. I mean, for companies, and then the sort of more nonprofit, right? Now, what we have academics in it as well, and we also have a broader community that we need to pull in because we're not the only ones. Because there are also a number of academics and activists who do this. So you think like Joy Buolamwini, who from coded bias fame and gender shade study, Timnit Gebru, like there are a ton of people who have really interrogated these systems in the past, and we need to draw that community in as well because they, as a profession, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that none of us would be here if it weren't for that activism, and we always have to kind of center the view of people who are most likely to be harmed by these systems, which are ones that have the least amount of power. And I think all that's to say is that we just were motivated to do it, and we happen to have a lot of experience in doing it as a profession. But we're hoping that our views are not the dominant views. That it's just we're going to get the ball rolling, and it's going to be a real community effort.
So I hear in a lot of that you keep highlighting like the harms of AI. I wonder if you could dive deeper into that. And again, I kind of just look from the perspective of somebody who has never heard of an audit before. They say it's some project manager at company whatever is being told, hey, go look into an algorithmic audit. They've never considered the risk of AI, or they have extensively considered the risk of AI. And they're seeing this audit for the first time, and they're trying to understand the importance of it. I wonder if you can dive in more and just kind of tell us, like, what are these risks? What are things that people are looking for? What is an algorithmic audit going to uncover that someone at a company is not going to find on their own?
Yeah. Well, in theory, it doesn't necessarily have to uncover anything that they couldn't do themselves. It's just a matter of perspective and a matter of rigor. But the risks are pretty... At a highest level, the risks are pretty clear. Like, people have interests that they want to further, and they have rights. And so you could literally take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I'd recommend if somebody doing this exercise, pick any system. Let's say I'm the manager of this AI system in my company. I'm the one either developing it or I'm deploying it, and just think through that list of human rights. And like you could pick any list you want, and you would see that there are places that it could be impacted. And most importantly, the sort of lowest hanging fruit is the opportunity for discrimination. So, and it could be totally unintentional discrimination, but algorithms tend to be very good at finding ways of discriminating between people, right? Because that's what they're trained to do. So if I have an algorithm which is taking in some data from you and going to make some inference about you or make some decision about you, it's very good at figuring out who you are, because they're typically these very powerful systems. They've been trained on lots and lots of data. And so they start figuring out quickly differences between people, and they use that to make these inferences. And so it's not a big stretch to think that bias, is what we would call it, is going to lead potentially to significant discrimination. And so that's one which is very low-hanging fruit, and I think a lot of people talk about that. However, it's easier to deal. It's easier to identify it than it is to actually deal with it. And so that's still a problem. It's not like just because we know it's there, it means it's a solved problem. It's always going to be a problem. But then there are other things that are related to issues of transparency, which are less obvious. So one kind of fundamental right that people have has to do with sort of their right to make decisions for themselves, right? And so if you are filtering information or interacting with someone algorithmically, whether it's one of your employees or a potential customer or something like that, that algorithm, there's a filtering of that information that person gets, and there's some steering that might happen algorithmically, and that limits the person's agency in some way. It's like by default you can't help but do that. And so one sort of risk that's always there is, to what extent does this person know, A, that there's an algorithm at play, and B, to what extent does that algorithm limit their options in terms of their decision making? And so that's a real serious risk. And so what you have to think through, which is difficult, but you do have to think through it, is how much does that person understand, A, that there's an algorithm being used, and how much do they understand to what extent that algorithm is filtering information for them or delivering just a little piece of information. And so there's no way around getting, like, actually either talking to people or thinking carefully through that whole scenario. And that's where the average product manager is not necessarily going to have the experience needed to think carefully through those issues, which is why regulations like the EUAI Act really are forcing a lot of extra deliberation and documentation in the process of either deploying or developing these systems, because they can be hidden, and if you don't think about it carefully, it gets missed. I might have gone off the rails on your question there, but that's
No, it's a good introduction into what risk and harms an algorithm can pose. And honestly, I mean, we could talk for hours on the different ways an algorithm can cause harm. But it's nice to kind of just have a high level understanding for the context of the IAAA. On that, I'm curious. So, say somebody's listening to this podcast, watching us on YouTube, and they're super eager about getting into this industry, learning something new, bringing this knowledge back to their organization, whatever it may be, and they're curious about joining the IAAA. What do they gain from that? Like, where's what comes of being a member?
Yeah. So so there's a few things, and we're still developing it, and so we're still working on what exactly that will look like. But the the first thing is going to be access to potential training at a discounted price, and so we plan on having a lot of education partners that will sort of partner with us to provide some training. We happen to be the first ones just because I'm one of the founding members, and there aren't that many programs out there. So you do get access to our courses at a discounted rate if you're a member. So that's one, and there will be more options later. Um, we're also going to have a newsletter that I think is I mean, our plan is to really engage with regulators very closely and to curate sort of important issues related to this field, and that's going to be issued in the newsletter, which will be for subscribers. Um, I think there's going to be opportunities to get involved, uh, and certification, and eventually there's going to be certification, and that's something that we're still figuring out. Where we are going to, in some sense, endorse a particular certification for being an AI and algorithm auditor, uh, and that's going to be available to members. Um, and more than anything, I think if you want to be at the kind of cutting edge of where this is happening, we're going to have meetings. We're going to have live events. This is where it's going to be happening. I think the people who are on the ground floor of this are kind of at the cutting edge of how these regulations are going to get enforced. And I mean, like globally. I think that being a part of it is going to be you're going to be in on what's happening right now, and that's the this intangible benefit of being part of the organization. But full disclosure, we're still working on that. Like, we know it's super important, and so we launched this thing without having all of the details figured out. And now we're going to have a meeting next week about, or maybe this week, about actually sorting some of these issues out.
Yeah, it's all super exciting. And you know, it's good that you are just moving forward with it. And you know, it's the industry is an emerging industry. It's, you know, you got to be ahead of the game. Um, I will say too, to anyone that's watching or listening, so if you're interested in our courses, we have a link in the comments, but also a promo code for anyone that watches BABLing. Use promo code BABLing, and then members of the IAAA will get it half off, if I remember right. Yep. Maybe we've talked about these courses extensively throughout Babel, everywhere, our website and LinkedIn, all of that. But maybe you want to give people a high level understanding of, you know, what those courses are and why it's relevant to the IAAA.
Yeah. So these courses were developed by us from our internal training for our internal team and lessons we've learned over the past 5 years doing this. And it really just hits sort of like the must know. It's like the boot camp for algorithmic auditing. So it covers risk and impact assessments, AI governance and risk management, covers AI and algorithms, the technical bit. It covers bias, accuracy, and the statistics of AI testing. That's more of the actual testing of the systems. And then it covers AI audit and assurance. So more of the practical, what does it mean to actually perform one of these engagements? And it's the boot camp for all BABL auditors, but we've offered to external parties now, and we've had people successfully come through our course. And so it's it's really it's a ground floor, rapid. It's about 2 weeks per course, and there are 5 courses. Boot camp for auditors.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and it's yeah, they're amazing courses. If you haven't checked them out, definitely give it a look. I don't know if you do you have any last thoughts on this? Any final tidbits you want to leave for the audience on IAAA?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, come check us out. The website will be in the link below, and yeah, think about joining. I mean, if you're interested in this field, if you want to, you know, the field is small right now, but there's not like a huge demand at the moment for audits. But I think there's no world in which that doesn't grow, and I think there's no world in which that doesn't at least approach the scale of financial auditing. In which case, that's a massive industry. And so, if people are worried about what kind of jobs are going to outlast this sort of AI labor shift, well, it's the people who are shepherding these systems and making sure they don't hurt people. And so, just from future-proofing your skill set, it's a great area to go into, and I think the IAAA is a great place to keep your finger on the pulse of that industry. All right, well, so thank you for showing up. And so if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That helps us out. And if you are listening to us on a podcast, thank you for listening. This has been Lunchtime Babbling.